Have you ever been stuck in a loop? Hitting the same exact wall at work, with your team, maybe even in your own life. You feel like you're trying everything, but nothing ever really changes. Well, today, we're going to talk about a really powerful way to break that cycle. It's called naming, and it's all about making the invisible visible. Let's dive in. I want you to picture this. You're in a meeting, and it's tense. You can feel it. Everyone's kind of dancing around the real issue, just stuck talking about symptoms. And then, one person speaks up. No yelling, no pointing fingers, just a calm, clear, precise statement of what's really going on. And silence. The entire room just goes still. The whole atmosphere shifts in an instant. And that's the whole point. That stillness, it isn't because someone was rude or out of line. It's the opposite. It's that deep, profound, collective recognition of a truth that everyone in that room has been feeling but just couldn't find the words for. That is the moment we're talking about today. All right, so let's start by really defining the problem itself. It's that feeling, that frustrating feeling of being stuck in a loop that you just can't quite put your finger on. I bet this sounds familiar to some of you. You've brought in consultants, you've reorganized the team, you've tried all the new processes. Heck, you've maybe even hired and fired for the same role over and over, wondering, why can't anyone get this right? You are just exhausted from fighting the same fire. And you start to wonder, is it me? Am I the problem here? Am I going crazy? The answer is no. You're just fighting an enemy you can't see. And this brings us to a really core idea. The huge difference between the problems you can see, the symptoms, and the invisible system that's actually causing them. Okay, so here's a classic example. A team says, we have communication problems. That's the symptom. And what's the typical solution? Communication training, right? Which, let's be honest, almost never works. But naming the pattern sounds totally different. It sounds like decision-making authority is unclear. See the difference? Because nobody knows who has the final say. Every single conversation becomes this confusing, inefficient power struggle. The bad communication isn't the problem. The invisible structure is. So you can spend a fortune on workshops, you can buy all the new software, but if you're only treating the symptom, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a really deep wound. The pattern will just keep coming back again and again until somebody finally names the underlying dynamic so you can actually address it. And this is where the intervention of naming comes into play. And it's so important that we're crystal clear about what this is, and maybe more importantly, what it is not. When leaders hear we need to name the pattern, they often get really tense. They imagine public callouts, a lot of conflict, a lot of drama. But that's a total misunderstanding. Naming isn't about creating drama. It's the exact opposite. It's about getting out of the emotional, reactive blame game and moving to a precise, objective identification of a dynamic. It's not personal, it's systemic. So here's the definition we're going to use. Naming is surgical. It's not some clumsy accusation. It's a precise diagnosis. It finally gives language to a feeling that everyone's been sharing, and that makes the invisible structure of the problem visible. And when it's visible, you can finally change it. And the impact of naming is immediate. It just shatters these incredibly toxic cycles. The gaslighting stops because people suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm not imagining this. The blame cycle ends because everyone can see it's the system, not just one person's fault. And, maybe most importantly, people stop internalizing all that dysfunction as some kind of personal failure. Which, of course, leads to a really fascinating question. If this is so powerful, if it brings so much clarity, why is it so rare? Why do we work so hard to avoid doing it? Well, we avoid it because, often without even realizing it, we are invested in protecting the way things are right now, even when it's totally exhausting and not working. We're afraid of the discomfort that comes with the truth. I think the biggest fear leaders have is that by naming the issue, they'll create a whole new problem. But that's not what's happening. The dysfunction, the frustration, the resentment, all of that already exists. It's bubbling under the surface. Naming doesn't create it. It just flips on the lights in the room so you can no longer pretend it's not there. This is the other huge one, right? The other big fear. We think, I have to protect team morale, I have to preserve these relationships, so we stay quiet. We think we're being kind. But here's the thing we miss. The pattern itself is what's causing the damage. Those invisible dynamics that make people feel confused and unheard, the unspoken resentments that build up over months or years, that is what's destroying trust. Clearly identifying the issue doesn't harm the relationships. It's the very first step to repairing them by stopping the invisible bleeding. So when we protect the system by staying silent, what are we really protecting? Let's be honest. We're choosing our own comfort over clarity. We're protecting the current power structures. We're often protecting a leader's ego. And we're protecting our ability to avoid making really hard decisions. We're protecting the status quo, even as it drains all of our energy and resources. So what happens when a team, or even just one person, finally moves past that fear and actually names the pattern? Well, the shift is immediate, and it is profound. Just look at this internal transformation. It's night and day. Before naming, it's all self-blame. We internalize the dysfunction as some kind of personal flaw. But after it's named, there's this huge shift. People see the problem for what it is, a system pattern. Suddenly, it all makes sense. This is why past attempts failed. This is why other smart people struggled in the same role. It's just liberating. And this shift happens almost instantly, and it usually unfolds in 4 steps. First, there's just relief, a collective exhale, that feeling of, thank God I'm not losing my mind. Then comes validation. Okay, it wasn't just me. That leads to clarity, the big aha moment, and finally, you get agency. You can't fix a problem you can't see. Once it has a name, you can finally actually start to navigate. So at the end of the day, the choice isn't really between comfort and discomfort. It's between 2 different kinds of discomfort. There's the short-term, sharp discomfort of naming a difficult truth, which might last a few days. And then there's the long-term, chronic, corrosive cost of protecting a broken pattern. One is an investment in clarity. The other is a debt that just compounds over years in lost talent, wasted money, and zero progress. So the real question isn't whether naming is risky. The real question is this: what is the cost of your silence? How many good people are you going to lose? How much more money will be wasted? How many more years will you spend circling the exact same drain? All because the real problem remains invisible, unspoken, and unnamed.